chopping my head off again.
Scorch.
If you squish down,
You know what? Look,
small.
they know what the top of your head looks like. They need to see the steaks.
Yeah, shiny. Oh, that's more important than my head.
Well, in a minute, I'll...
Here, hold this up.
When you start to do stuff with the meat, then I'll point it down. There. Get us going.
Hey y'all, it's Mr. Patient. He's here with me, Terry from Iowa, and this is HomeHeritageWays. And what we're doing today is we're getting ready to prepare some steaks for grilling.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do all that again, but pause because I'm going to do... he's here with me, Terry from Iowa, and then Terry from Iowa. Let's see what's catchy.
Trimming the fat.
And we're trimming the fat. Or no, because the whole video is not about that. The whole video is we're cooking some man food or something like that. Okay, start all over. Go. You're pausing. I just want a couple of sentences, then the music, then tell what you're doing. So give me a breath. Give me a pause.
Okay. Hey y'all, Mr. Patient, and I've got Terry from Iowa here with me, and what we're getting ready to do is to prepare some steaks for grilling.
Okay, that's right. No, it's a little boring because, you know, but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, I got it.
Go ahead. Okay, I want something like, today we're preparing some man food. Give me something that's not boring.
Take it up.
Okay, take 3.
Hey y'all, Mr. Patient. Hey y'all, Mr. Patient with HomeHeritageWays, and I've got Terry from Iowa here. And what are we going to do today?
Today we're raising the steaks.
There you go.
That was better. Okay. All right. Go.
All right, now. So what we're doing is we're getting ready to prepare steaks for grilling, and you want to kind of explain what all you kind of go through and where you got your meat and that kind of thing.
Sure. You can go to any grocery store. You can get steaks. We believe where I come from, we believe in buying local as much as possible.
We do
knowing what your meat has in it.
Know your farmer.
Know your farmer. Oddly enough, we do know our farmer because the steak we have here is a steak that was done from a 4-H project. The friend of ours has 2 children that are in 4-H, and part of their project is meat grading. And so they raise the cattle, they send it off to the butcher will have it, and then the steak guy comes down and grades it just like they do for the grocery stores. And then that's how the kids learn about the meat that they're raising and all that.
Right.
We bought half of the beef to help the child, so that money goes back to his pocket to buy another cow for next year. And we got lucky that the steaks from the particular cow he had rated out at prime.
Oh wow.
And with his cow, that is only the second cow in 4-H in our area that has been graded out in prime in like 10 years.
Okay. Well, see, and that's interesting to me because I didn't know that 4-H did that. I only knew 4-H is like showing cattle.
Showing cattle, yes.
I didn't know they actually did grading of the beef, you know, and the child learning how to properly care for the cattle just for purposes of consumption. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because I mean, they need to know, especially if they're wanting to get into the cattle business eventually, what they need to do to get the best dollar for their cows. And like the boy that did this one, he knew how to raise it, how to feed it, how to finish it off. And we will start doing. We purchased this from the family. We had to go to the butcher shop. The butcher shop will actually ask you if you purchase a half or quarter beef or even a whole beef. They'll come down and ask you how many steaks you want. Do you want, the ribs? Do you want the brisket? How do you want the brisket? If you want the cap and the flat, or if you how you want it, and you can actually design what meat you really like. So someone don't like T-bones, they can have that turned into hamburger meat. Right. If you're only into ribeyes, right. You can have those steaks. Okay. That's the great thing about the butcher. Other thing about the butcher is what we're about to learn now about trimming this fat off is when they cut it, they don't trim it up to look pretty like your grocery store does, the set in the case, because that's what's going to attract you, but you also pay more for that.
Right.
As we can see here, we have your basic T-bone steak. We have one here that I've just got finished cutting. Important thing with steaks, as we've discussed before, is when you pull them out of the refrigerator, you want to bring them up to room temperature. Otherwise, your center's still cold, you're outside. As you go to cook it, will heat up where you don't get that perfect temperature that you're looking for. A lot of people can't figure out why my outside looks almost burnt, but my inside is still rare, and that's because they don't let the outside and inside come to the same temperature. Now, as I was speaking before with your fat, this is a nice marbling. That's why I graded out at prime, because you can see all the fat marbling through here. Fat equals flavor. But some fat, like this rind on the outside, notice it's your outside rind, that's a little harder. Now, you can still cook that on there. You can leave it on there. It's just a harder rind. It will take a long time to render that down. So basically all I do is I find where the rind level is, and I might pop it up just a little bit higher, and then just take your knife and come down and just follow the line through there, and then take that part of the rind off. And then you'll come over here. And so once again, this is for your first time grillers. You're going to take the hard parts off. If you want to, you can feel around the steak. If you feel something hard, like this will cook off. It's right near the end of the bone. It's not a big deal. You're not going to eat that. Okay. But if you wanted to, you can come in here and just do this nice little triangle cut, and you can pull that fat out too. That's not a big deal. Right. Then, while your meat is going to be over here resting and coming up to room temperature, you can go buy your regular seasoning salt, or you can make your own. I prefer to make my own. We do what's kind of called a sugar steak, where this actually has my own personal seasoning salts in it. It's got some cumin. It's got some everything bagel seasoning. It's got a little bit of organic granulated sugar and a little bit of brown sugar. Okay. Just enough that it will caramelize on there when you get that hot, but not enough to make it over sickeningly sweet. Right. And it's almost like having a barbecue or a steak sauce on here. And what I'll do is just kind of give it a generous little sprinkle. And it looks like that's a lot of salt you're putting on there. Well, it kind of isn't, because what you're wanting to do is salt is going to draw the moisture up out of this meat. The red stuff you see that comes out there, everybody goes, oh, there's blood all over my plate. That is actually a protein. That's the beef flavor. Okay. The higher up you bring those to your beef, to the top of the beef, the more beefy flavor you get. Okay. So you're bringing some of the moisture out. It's almost like, if you've heard them talk about dry aging. Same principle they do. It's called a quick dry aging, where you can cover it with salt, set it on a sheet so it can get air vent up and down, and it does the same thing. It draws the moisture out. So you're going to put this on, and while it's sitting there, all these proteins are going to come up to the top. Just cut both sides really good. And if you don't like getting overhand, you can use a spoon just to flatten it all out. But make sure you have a nice cover. No one likes a one-sided seasoned piece of meat. So make sure you have nice seasoning on both sides of it. Set it off. Now she's going to come up to room temperature. And what that's also going to do is all this spice that we have here, that's going to go back into the meat too. Okay. Now, to keep that from going really, really dry, you can do one of two things. You can have a spritz bottle, and the spritz bottle is really cool because you can put beef stock in there. You can put a juice in there. You can actually get the flavored seltzer waters and put in there. And just spritz these down every time you flip your steak over, spritz them down. Other option is do steak butter, which is what I do is I put a little pot with some butter while it's warm, and then when I flip my steak over, I dip a brush in butter, I brush the butter, and while that steak is absorbing, it absorbs that butter back into the...
See, I like that better than the water because it's butter.
There you go. Butter's better.
You know, looking at these steaks, we're probably, what,
I think
half to 3/4 inch?
Roughly, yes.
So, how long do you think, once I pull that out of the refrigerator, how long do you think that would take to get to room temperature?
I would let it sit for a good, at least 30-45 minutes, and just come back and touch it. It's a touch, go feel it. What's this? Is it feeling like a room temperature? Okay. And then after you cook it, once again, we're bringing the proteins down. A lot of people do not understand the resting process. They think, I'm done, I throw it on the plate, I'm going to cut it open, I'm going to eat it.
Okay.
And then their stuff is dry and their juices are all over their table. So after we season these and we take them out to the grill, then we'll go with the next step on that, and I'll show you how to use the difference between direct heat and indirect heat. And we're going to learn the difference of the different type of coals to use so you don't get frustrated lighting your fires. And we'll show you how to do this meat so you ain't got a charred piece of meat on the outside and a raw on the inside, and how to do it, because everybody in your area might want a rare steak, might want a medium rare. We're going to kind of talk about a little bit of the differences of rare, medium rare, and what these feel like.
All right. Now that we've got our steaks marinated, we've talked about the grill, we've got our grill going, now it's time to cook some meat.
Cook some meat.
All right.
We're raising the steaks now.
Raising the steaks.
So, as we talked before, there's indirect and direct heat. This is the indirect method. As you see, we have all the coals piled up over here. That's where all of our heat source is going to come from. This side, however, still has heat, but there's going to be no chance of flare-ups because no fat is going to be hitting the flame. Okay. So now, you just arrange your steaks. I prefer to do, since these are T-bones, I prefer to do bone side towards the fire to start with. And if I'm cooking chicken or anything else, I love to start bone side down, just because that burns the marrow, actually implies more flavor into what you're doing.
Okay, so if you're doing a drumstick, how do you do a drumstick?
When I do a drumstick, I personally used to turn the meat away from the fire first, put the bottom, the small part here, let that the big part bake. So basically you got the big part around the outer edge. It'll look just like this. Okay. For you to come up that way, it gives this side time to bake, and then I will turn it back around and let it finish up. That gives that marrow time to really soak into your meat. What we are doing here is grilling. Now, I know they interchange the word grilling and barbecuing a lot. Barbecuing usually implies you're going to cook low and slow. Your fire is usually 225 degrees. Grilling is actually hotter and faster. So if you have someone that really is into this stuff, they will come on here and say, oh, he's not barbecuing, he's grilling. Yes, we are. That is exactly what we're doing. We're grilling. You will have people say, come on over to my house for a barbecue, and they're cooking hot dogs. That's just because they're using the word as a general term.
Right.
Now, at this point in time, we're going to let the steaks kind of bake over here on this side. Okay. And you can do a couple things. You can have a spritz bottle with some water, some juice, even some beef stock in it, and spritz everything down. Okay. Or you can import fat by using butter. Now, what I've done is a steak butter.
Butter's good.
This is a steak butter. This butter actually has some everything bagel seasoning to it. You can do a little salt. You can do oregano. You can do chili powder, however you want your steaks to be. Okay. And I'll just put it in a little pan and set it off here to the side like so. And butter will just start to melt. And so what happens, every time I flip my steak over, I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to kind of baste it lightly with butter to keep moisture into my steaks so they won't get that dried out feeling. Okay. Then it's just a matter of knowing how everybody wants their steaks. If they want them medium, they want them rare, that's how long you're going to keep your timing on your steaks. Okay. So right now we're going to put these in here. We have 2 extra just because we don't have room. So we're going to close her up and let her cook. With the indirect heat, you want to draw your heat over here because this is now your oven. Okay. So your heat is over here.
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
Yes. You have a damper on the bottom, and that's where, as we know, hot air rises. So as hot air is rising, this is is working like a vacuum. It is pulling air from the bottom and then bringing it across and forcing it out as it rises. Well, if you bring this damper to the far side, it's got to bring the heat from one side of this dome to the other side of the dome, bringing the heat. So it's pulling the heat over here. And the flavor
of the smoke.
Yes. Okay. Which brings that over here. Okay. And as you see, if you'll look really close, and you have to really stand close, it's called a thin blue smoke for a reason.
You can just barely see
just barely see it. Yep. And that's what you're wanting. That is what imparts your flavor. That big white stuff that you have when you first light that up, that will make your meat extremely bitter and just ruin a piece of meat. Right. This is great to know what temperature is in here, but I personally, you can buy aftermarket thermometers, and I will actually come in front of my damper and get down close to the grill grate, it just takes drilling a little hole with a wing nut. And I might put one here, and I might actually put one down here also, because this is great to know what the temperature of your dome is when you're doing like the vortex heat where we were talking, where everything's in the middle and it's working like a convection oven. But with indirect heat, I want to know what the temperature at my cooking surface is. Because if I'm getting 400 degrees up here, but this isn't drawing it right, and I haven't adjusted my damper to draw it correctly, then my cooking temperature down here could be 200 degrees, and I'm not really cooking anything. Because, like I said, this is what dictates how fast that burns and how hot that burns. So if, you know, and I might look down and this says 400 degrees, I know I've got too much air coming through here. I need to close this off to make the airflow slow down and make my heat come back down.
So on that temperature over there, I mean, is there like a range you're looking?
I would like to keep this over here about 300 to 350. And even with something this small, you can have a good 25 to 30 degree distance of difference of your temperature. I was cooking at one time. I have a big 4-foot casket style grill and ran 3 thermometers on it, and with 4 feet with 2 bundles of charcoal, I had a 50 to 75 degree difference in this amount of space. And it doesn't sound like a lot when you say 50 degrees, but the difference between bringing your meat up to temp fast, the longer that meat's going to stay down there on that cold temperature, it just takes it longer to cook. And you're going to not get that nice flavor that you want. Some people say, put it down, leave it alone, don't come back and check it. You can play with your food with this. You can come back and check it.
Well, I've heard it said that if you're looking, you're not cooking.
This is true. That is correct for barbecuing, because you want this to stay at the 225 degree range to get your whatever you're barbecuing. When you're grilling, to make your steaks release nicely or your hamburgers release nicely, you want your proteins to cook and sear, so you can get up underneath but not leave half of it on the grill.
Yeah,
so
I
you
have
need
that problem.
Yes, a lot of people do that. They're like, I want to flip my hamburger and half of it stayed on the grill.
Or I go to pick up that piece of chicken and it's like, doggone it.
It's because the proteins didn't cook long enough to release from the grill. So like now we can come back here and just kind of give you a look at this. So everything's already starting to get a tint to it. So at this point in time, you could flip it over and just see what it's looking like on this side. So we're now starting to get that light gray, dark brown. So if we wanted to come back and bring everything over one time, as you see, our butter's already starting to do our thing.
Did you say already how many times you do or don't flip it?
No, that is a personal thing on just what the meat. Some people don't like to. Some people want to know what my meat's looking like. Now, you see we already flipped it over. We've kind of looked. Everything, see how it's all nice, even the same color. Now I'll just come back with my baster. Stir my butter up a little bit. I'll just give it a good pop on there. And here's your flare up we were talking about. The reason that's flaring up is because the fat from the butter has fell onto that grate. If that flare up got too big, we could close this lid up and it would go right back down again. But doing this just puts a little extra moisture into it. Yeah. We can close our grill back up and let her go. And it's just that easy. It's not rocket science, and it's not overwhelming when you take just the basics and don't pressure yourself to do something you can't do. Anybody can do this.
Because I mean, look, by shutting that, it's already back up to 350 degrees.
And those have been sprayed with the oil and the little kosher salt. And I just kind of put them. I like to kind of off the heat a little bit, but since we're having so much room here with stuff, I put them over here so that way they'll just cook a little quicker.
So here we go. We're pulling the last of the steaks off,
and now we'll set them off. Here's what the flare-ups we were talking about. Notice how we just had them over the direct heat to that final sear on them. All that fat stripped on them. Now, if we grab this lid and just set it over there for a couple seconds, now we've killed a lot of the air that's in there. Now your flames are all diminished. You leave over a few more seconds, rest those with it. So, what we're going to do with these steaks now is we're going to tint them and put them over here to rest. Now the reason you rest your steak is because if you cut into your steak right away, all those nice flavorful proteins will just go everywhere on your plate, and you'll have an old dry steak. Now, resting this...
Dry steak is not good.
No. There's no amount of steak sauce in the world can fix that, and if you cook this right, you really don't need steak sauce. So, you tent this back up, and you let that rest for at least 5 or 10 minutes. 15 would be great. And what that's allowing is those proteins to pull back into the meat. And as those back into the meat, that's what gives you that nice steak flavor. All the juices are pulled back in, the flavors, the seasoning and everything. Okay. It's drawing everything back in.
All right, so we're done with our steaks. We hope you learned something. And stay tuned because we got more stuff for you. Bye.
Bye.